In contrast to our multi-body part for the precious cylinder, we're going to build this as a top-down assembly. So the first two exercises were bottom-up. Bottom-up is building each of the parts individually and then assembling them into our final assembly. If there is a problem or a misalignment, probably won't find it, and then we would have to go through, won't find it until we get to the assembly stage, and then we would have to go through each of the parts and make those changes individually at each part. Multi-body and top-down. Multi-body is existing within a part, creating separate bodies, and the reason that we saved those bodies was to get an assembly, get individual parts, but still have kind of that that one model to go back and work with. Top-down is going to tie parts together within the assembly, and we have the choice of making them virtual. Each of the parts can be virtual, or they can be saved out as individual pieces. So pretty much going to reproduce, and there's kind of two directions to go. I have my preference. A lot of the top-down exercises that you'll see will draw this part and relate this part to this part, and then relate this part to this part, which is related to this part. And if something changes on the first part, it causes a downstream effect that the data flow can get pretty scary. So my recommendation is to base the top-down on sketches. Gives me a skeleton and an envelope to work with. And it also gives me a certain degree of stability if one of the parts radically changes. Okay, so I'm going to go into to Solidworks, and we're going to pretty much reproduce the sketch, but I'm going to have new, and we are in an assembly, and I don't have anything to bring in because I'm just going to start building. Right, so one of the most important rules is I do not want all my parts related to SM1. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is save this assembly. We're going to get back to my project folder, give this a new name, and this can be the top-down P6-7 top-down folder. And so this is my pressure cylinder, and I don't necessarily have to designate it as top-down. Wouldn't hurt, but we'll go ahead and give it a name. And then in the front plane, I'll open up a sketch, and we're pretty much going to do what we did with the multi-body part. I'm going to generate those profiles for the revolves. I'm going to put in a pattern for the bolt holes and the through holes. So let's go to a center line. Let's see, I need my center line, infinite length, vertical, and I'll drop that on the origin. Again, rather than backing up through, I'd just rather hit escape, L on the keyboard. We'll drag out, and since this is in inches, we're going to run into the same kind of issue. So before I get too far in, we'll do millimeters, grams, and seconds. It kicks me out of the sketch. Now this is going to be an assembly sketch. Right, so this is existing at the top level of the assembly. And then the lid is going to be there. We're going to have a wall, and make sure to close those guys off just for future reference, and a gasket. Alright, so I can do the same types of things. This was 100 millimeters on the OD, and then we had 60 millimeters on the ID. and from here to here was 65. And the reason I couldn't pick that line is that's going to be the overall. I didn't break it up like I did in the multi-body. And that's not entirely unexpected. We're going to drag a little bit and move a little bit, and it can get a little weird if those lines in that shape gets so there again I picked the line that gives me an overall height, but what I really wanted was from the gasket to the top of the cover plate. 13 on the base, and then 20 for the bottom. Okay, so that gives me my shapes, and this can do a lot of conceptual type drawing in this 2D environment in Profile and get quite a lot of information to start building. So this is going to be my my revolves, my revs, and then I'm going to rotate over a little bit. If I go into the top plane, didn't want to go necessarily into the view, but if I can see it, then I will pull the circle out, and if I can get it to go coincident, now this circle is related to the sketch. Right? And one of the things we'll have to watch for is I really don't need the this ID. I'm just putting in information that is going to be useful to building parts. So this was our 75 millimeter, and I'll go ahead and put in the points. All right, and we can do that as a circular pattern, and there were 8 of those. Okay, and it's kind of hard to see the little yellow dots, but they are there. The circular pattern automatically picks the origin as a center point, so the X and Y are going to be translations or shifts. We can dimension the radius and the angular spacing. If I didn't already generate this geometry, I might do that, but that gives me enough to work with. Now the points will go to blue, and I'm just dragging them off and away and then dragging them back so that it finds those coincidences back to what would be my base circle. And I can make that a construction. In this case, it doesn't hurt, doesn't help. All right, so those are my 2 sketches, and so this will be for the holes. And one of the reasons I want to rename those, which to rename we're just going to single click again, give it a little bit of a pause. That helps to pull those out. That's going to help me with my description to figure out, remember what I told this to do. So I'm kind of building up my structure and following a process. All right, so we're going to build the first couple parts. Insert a new part. All right, so here's the a difference is that when I tell it the new part, this is automatically going to default to the front plane. In this case, it's okay, but it doesn't give me a lot of options if I'm out of position. So I'm just going to right click. Oh, sorry, just left click in the work area to clear that out. All right, and what we're seeing is brackets around part 1. So if I wanted to, I can rename it now, and this was the base chamber. And the brackets are denoting that this is a virtual component. It only exists in the assembly until we save it or extract it from the assembly, somewhat like the saved bodies. It's only going to live in the assembly. So it gives us another option to be able to manage these parts and do a lot of what-if scenarios before we commit to having a lot of individual parts. So I need to edit this in context. So right-click, and we're going to edit the part. And if there was other parts, they would turn transparent, but since they're not, then we are in the part, and I can open up a sketch on the front plane, and we're doing pretty much what we did up to this point in building our pieces. I could convert entities. I can trace over the top of from point to point, and we're basically just getting that geometry in so that I can perform the revolve. I think I mentioned I don't necessarily have to have a center line, and pretty sure I'm not going to be able to use, so as illustration, I'm not going to be able to use the assembly center line from my sketches. I will have to use an object in the sketch. So this becomes a feature and revolve. And the axis of revolution, if I come over and try and pick the center line, it's not going to happen. So we have to come to one of the objects, and I can pick that as my revolve, and that will give me a desired result. All right, S key to Hole Wizard, or you come up to the command manager to the Hole Wizard, and this is going to be a threaded hole. Wherever we can use the Hole Wizard, that's going to be help us out on the drawing side as well. All right, so an M8 by 1.25. There we go. And up to next will be fine. Now I don't have to worry about a scope, a feature scope, because I'm inside of this part. I'm really only modifying this part. So we are looking for the points. And we'll see if I can pick those up. And I'm just placing them and putting them into the group. All right, so they're all defined, they're all tied to that pattern. Unless I change the number of instances, I'm pretty much I'm gonna be pretty stable on this this sketch. I did not check the depth, so it went up to next, which sends it all the way through the part. So that's a little deep. And we decided this is still, it went back to inches on the base part. So if we do the shoulder at 17 millimeters, then I think we did 20 millimeters on the, nope, we need to reverse that, 17 millimeters on the threads and 20 millimeters to the shoulder. And it went to inches, of course. So quick correction, mm and 17 mm. Alright, so since I didn't catch that, we'll come over to millimeters, grams, and seconds. Wasn't in the sketch or doing anything at that time, so it's going to happen pretty much immediately. Alright, so one more, and we'll do the Hole Wizard. We're looking for the M24 by 3, and then this one will be up to next. And our position, since I pre-selected, I don't have to worry about the 3D sketch. Position that at the origin and go ahead and save our part. So really it doesn't look that much different, except that we have all this blue. I have a return to the assembly in the upper left corner, and we do want to save this. Alright, so we've made our first component. Do I want to save this internally inside of the assembly? Save externally. It's going to ask us this each time we save. So at some point, I'll probably do not show again, but for now it can pop up. And we're going to see these little arrows and references back to the other geometry. All right, so I can hide my part. And then we'll go into another new part. And again, just left click so that it clears it out. I can rename to the gasket. And right click and edit part, which is the same as coming up to edit component. So once again, minor differences in terminology. They do the same thing. It has the same icon. Anyway, editing the part. I'm opening that up. So let's show this real quick. and that was supposed to go to transparent, or be a little more transparent, so maybe because I had it hidden, or maybe for 2020 it changed. Alright, so because this gasket includes the hole, we are going to need a center line. So front plane, open up a sketch. We'll do the center line, vertical, infinite length. I could also convert. So let's do that. I can convert the assembly center line into my part, and then toggle that over to being construction geometry. And then we have a rectangle. So one of the things that I found in my shortcuts, no, that doesn't have a shortcut associated to it, so I'm going to hold off on trying that one. Go back to the point, and when I apparently when I undid when I did the undo, it still says it's on edge, so it might be there. All right, well, let's try it. I think it kicked it out, but now it's seeing the line, so it must have blended in. So if I really wanted to find out, I can hide that sketch and still not seeing it, so that's interesting. Okay, there it is. So graphics card having to catch up. Alright, another S key. Hole wizard. Let's go Control 8 so we're looking at it again. This was a through hole for 10 millimeters. Alright, and this part is also in custom, so I would expect that we will still have to deal with the units at some point. Alright, get down to 10 millimeters, up to next, position, and I'll just stay with the same process. Go ahead and go into isometric and rebuild just to make sure. Alright, so these parts are in relation to each other, and because I was doing revolves, I don't really have to worry about offset planes. When we look at this, the top plane for the part is still going to be the top plane for the assembly, so we haven't really shifted, or we didn't have to create a plane and shift. It was by virtue of my my process or my selection. Alright, one more. New part. And pick. And this is going to be the cover plate. And edit feature or edit part. Let's go back to the revs and show the revolves. And we'll open up a sketch in the front plane. And it didn't go to transparent, so that apparently has changed for 2020. I'm going to hit the tab button on the keyboard, which is the same as hiding that part. We can also right click and show or hide components. And that just cleans it up a little bit so it's not as confusing to look at. We'll go right into features, revolve, and then the axis of revolution again. Can't pick the assembly center line, so I pick the line since it goes to the center line, and that becomes my base. S key, hole wizard. We're still in the 10 millimeters up to next, so we'll stay with those. And I'll pick up all the points. And if you want, you could revisit the feature pattern and sketch driven pattern. Okay, so I have my part, one more S key to the hole wizard, and this becomes the threaded. And somewhere we're going to have the M24 by 3, also up to next, and its position goes to the center. All right, so just a quick note before we wrap up. If I want to make a change, these parts and most of these dimensions are all built around these two sketches. So let's just go into the Rev and say I wanted to go from 13 millimeters to 6 millimeters. And then when I rebuild, that sketch is controlling the thickness of the part. All right, so I can go in and I can make changes and do what if scenarios on this sketch and see what downstream effect it has to one or all of the parts as we go through the build. All right, so again, there's a certain amount of risk in building these. You have to be comfortable with some of the diagnostics, just error checking and expecting that these are going to go with the yellow explanation points and the red you have a problem. So this is be aware of it, use it, and build into it, and make good choices. Mainly if you encounter this, you know what it is and how it was produced.